Bring in Tom Rogan, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
There's a lot I want to break down, and I do want to dig a little bit into Russia, but I want to talk about the shakeup at the White House very briefly. Was there blame placed on Sean Spicer for the portrayal of this Russian investigation looming over the presidency? And on top of that, the reason I ask you that is because is that really going to change? Look at the week ahead. I mean, we're already talking about previews of the Senate and hearings that could take place.
Yes, and the second question, no. Look, Sean Spicer was blamed by the president, I think, for his inability, and frankly, it was unfair because there's no way he could have pushed it off to change the narrative away from Russia. And the president, I think, watching the press conferences became increasingly frustrated by that. But as you suggest, with this investigation continuing, with the testimony coming on Capitol Hill, which will inevitably and necessarily create media coverage, it isn't going away. And so one positive, I think, for the president is that with Mr. Scaramucci coming in and being sort of quite clinical about, okay, this is damaging for us, but here's how we portray our message, there will at least be some sense of more efficiency in terms of how the White House goes on message on topics instead of simply deviating and bloviating about the Russia investigation.
That being said, there was some news that came out this week. We all have been talking about the New York Times piece where the president was critical of his now Attorney General Jeff Sessions. That story is not going away anytime soon. And in fact, the Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley had a tweet out yesterday that said, you know, if you're the Washington Post, why didn't you come out with the whole transcript and just have it all out there? Because now we're all speculating on anonymous sources of whether or not the content of the conversations between then someone who was just supporting the then would-be president and someone who is now the Attorney General. So it's very speculative.
It is, and you know, you can understand from the administration's point of view that they find it to be unfair. But on the flip side, the nature of the kind of intelligence that was being talked about there is such that the intelligence community would be very, and I think understandably, reluctant to release that kind of information, not simply for the content, but the way it speaks to sources and methods. For example, the suggestion was that it was recorded in the Kremlin, where in the Kremlin, how in the Kremlin, who was there, what was the access. That gets into stuff the intelligence community needs to keep quiet, otherwise the Russians shut it down.
Okay, and I want to sort of go on a little bit of a tangent here because there was links between then the president perhaps taking on special counselor Robert Mueller of the FBI. Is there anything to that story? I mean, you hear that there could be tension between the two, and I'm sort of wondering if is that something that we should be focusing on? Is that even a possibility?
I think it is a possibility. I think there is I think the president is very obviously deeply upset by that. I think that beyond the president, though, Republicans on Capitol Hill, both quite overtly, and it's significant that in the overt sense, as well as behind the scenes, say this would be a kind of game changer for us.
A total game changer.
And so I think it's practically, it would be a very bad move for the president to make.
Well, not only is he unfireable, but the scope of his investigation is nothing the president can even fathom. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, to put it lightly. Am I right?
Right. And I think, you know, again, that comes back to that point with Scaramucci and the White House, that at this point, with tax reform bubbling up, the best thing the president can do is focus on issues. I mean, he has his popularity with his base. There is an expectation in Congress that we need to get a win here on the Republican part. So if he pushes that, to some degree, he might become more satisfied. And just let the Russia stuff go where it goes, because if you can't do anything about it, you just burn energy.
Okay, quickly, what's your sense of optimism? I mean, you know, you've covered a lot of different, this isn't your first rodeo, you've covered a lot of different things, wars and whatnot, but what's your expectation with this new shakeup?
Well, I think in the short term, it will bring some sense of, you know, comfort to the White House. I think that it matters greatly that President Trump and Scaramucci get along very well. As a secondary point, though, behind the scenes, there are rumors of potential other resignations, both at the cabinet level and below. If that happens, then it builds this narrative that the White House lacks competence to some degree. Exactly.
All right, Tom. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Leland?